Hi, this is the second reading task for Year 3 and it's based around Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Chapter 8. So here again are our characters and the objects that you'll see in the story. Have a little think about which of these characters or objects you have read about in the story so far. Obviously we've met Charlie and his family. We've also met Augustus Gloop and Veruca Salt. We've also met Grandpa Joe, and we know all about the golden tickets and the Wonka bars. What has happened in the story so far? Well, so far we have learnt about Charlie and the poor situation his family are in. We also know that Charlie lives with Grandpa Joe, 3 other grandparents and his mum and dad, and he has been hoping to find one of the golden tickets that Willy Wonka has advertised to allow him to go inside the factory. We've also learnt that Veruca Salt and Augustus Gloop have won a golden ticket too. We've heard about the Oompa Loompas, but we haven't met them yet. So as I said, we haven't met the Oompa Loompas yet, but we know they're in the story. We also haven't met Mike TV or Violet Beauregard, and even though we've heard about Mr. Willy Wonka, we haven't had him in the story directly. So today we're going to be retrieving information, looking and finding as usual. Some of the questions will be based around inference, thinking about what does this word suggest and using the start of this word suggests, and also what impression does this give you of the character. The impression I get is. We're also going to be thinking a little bit about how the characters feel and what clues in the text help to tell us about how they feel. Here's a vocabulary that you might not be certain of. So flagging, that means to be waving down. It does have another meaning, but in the story today it is about waving something down. Criticise, to insult or disapprove of something. Treasured possession, that means something that you own and you don't ever want to lose. Maybe something like a cuddly toy that you've had since you were tiny, or a piece of jewellery which is very expensive. And a racket, again a racket has more than one meaning, but in the story today it means to be noisy. So chapter 8, 2 more golden tickets found. So we know that Augustus Gloop and Veruca Salt have won one each, and now we're about to find out who the next 2 winners are. That evening, Mr. Bucket's newspaper announced the finding of not only the 3rd golden ticket, but the 4th as well. Now that part that's highlighted in red makes me think that a tiny bit more hope has just gone from Charlie, because he's just realised that there's less chance of him finding another golden ticket. 2 golden tickets found today, screamed the headlines. Only 1 more left. Now it says screamed the headlines. Obviously we know that headlines don't actually scream from a newspaper. It is talking about the fact that it's eye-catching and it's big bold letters, and obviously the Bucket family have been watching carefully to see about these golden tickets, so that will stand out to them even more than headlines usually do. All right, said Grandpa Joe when the whole family was gathered in the old people's room after supper. Let's hear who found them. When Grandpa Joe says all right, it's like he's calming them down. The impression I get is that Grandpa Joe is someone who leads the family in discussions. The 3rd ticket, read Mr. Bucket, holding the newspaper up close to his face because his eyes were bad. The 3rd ticket was found by Miss Violet Beauregard. The words "because his eyes were bad" gives me the impression that they are poor because they can't afford to buy Mr. Bucket glasses. However, it also gives me the impression that he's used the money for something else. So he's obviously very caring because he's put his family first. The 3rd ticket was found by a Miss Violet Beauregard. There was great excitement in the Beauregard household when our reporter arrived to interview the lucky young lady. Cameras were clicking and flashbulbs were flashing, and people were pushing and jostling and trying to get a bit closer to the famous girl. Pushing and jostling gives me the impression that everyone wanted to be near to Violet Beauregard. They wanted to hear all about how she found the ticket, and they weren't really thinking about the people nearest to them. They didn't mind if someone got hurt, for example. And the famous girl was standing on a chair in the living room, waving the ticket madly at arm's length as though she were flagging a taxi. Now, waving the ticket madly at arm's length, she's obviously trying to get the attention of the people in the room. I get the impression that Violet Beauregard always wants to be centre of attention. This also tells me that Violet Beauregard was very excited to get the ticket because she's waving at everyone to show them. She wants everyone to know that she's the winner. Okay, so here's our text for you to have a go answering some questions. I will give the answers, so if you don't want to hear them straight away, you can pause the video. She was talking very fast and very loudly to everyone, but it was not easy to hear all that she said because she was chewing so ferociously upon a piece of gum at the same time. "I'm a gum chewer normally," she shouted, "but when I heard about these ticket things of Mr. Wonka's, I gave up gum and started on chocolate bars in the hope of striking lucky. Now, of course, I'm back on gum. I just adore gum. I can't do without it. I munch it all day long except for a few minutes at meal times when I take it out and stick it behind my ear for safekeeping. To tell you the truth, I simply wouldn't feel comfortable if I didn't have that little wedge of gum to chew on every moment of the day. I really wouldn't." Okay, so at the bottom there's some vocabulary. Striking, hitting something or discovering something, and wedge means a chunk or a piece. If we look back at the text again, the part where it says talking very fast and very loudly, this gives me the impression that Violet is a very extroverted person. She likes everyone to know where she is and what she's doing, and is not shy in the least. The next part, not easy to hear all that she said because she was chewing. This is obviously written by the reporters, so I started to think that the reporters do not look upon her favourably. They feel that she is behaving in a silly manner. These ticket things, those words give me the impression that Violet Beauregard doesn't really care about the tickets that much. These ticket things, she's talking about them as if she'd quite like to have one, unlike Charlie, who would be absolutely desperate for a ticket. Stick it behind my ear. Now, that phrase gives me the impression that Violet Beauregard is not very hygienic, because if you chew gum and you've had it in your mouth, it's a good idea to throw it away afterwards. Otherwise you'd spread dirt. Okay, so here are the questions. Number 1, why could the reporters not hear her well? Well, the reason was she was chewing so much, so there was something obviously blocking the words that she was saying. Question 2, what does the word ferociously tell you about the chewing? So the word ferociously tells me that she's chewing quite quickly and frantically. Number 3, how does Violet feel about chocolate? How do you know? Well, as I said before, the phrase "these ticket things" gives me the impression that she's not 100% about the golden tickets. She prefers gum because she went back to gum. So that's how Violet feels about chocolate. She likes chocolate. How do I know? She doesn't love it. She prefers gum because she went back to the gum. Question 4, what impression do the reporters have of Violet? Well, it says to begin with, that it wasn't easy to hear her because she was chewing so ferociously. It says that she was talking very fast and very loudly. And she told them that she sticks gum behind her ear. I believe that the reporters think that Violet is quite a rude child because she talked with gum in her mouth the entire time, which is not a polite thing to do. I think that they probably think she's very silly for sticking gum behind her ear, because really gum should be thrown in the bin. And the other impression is that she is a very outgoing person because she talks fast, she talks loudly, and she's not shy at all. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is read the rest of the chapter to you. I'm going to start here. My mother says it's not ladylike and it looks ugly to see a girl's jaws going up and down like mine do all the time, but I don't agree. And who's she to criticise anyway? Because if you ask me, I'd say that her jaws are going up and down almost as much as mine are, just from yelling at me every minute of the day. Now, Violet, Mrs. Beauregard said from a far corner of the room, where she was standing on the piano to avoid being trampled by the mob. All right, mother, keep your hair on, Miss Beauregard shouted. And now, she went on, turning to the reporters again, it may interest you to know that this piece of gum I'm chewing right at this moment is one I've been working on for over 3 months solid. That's a record. It's beating the record held by my best friend, Miss Cornelia Prince-Metal, and she was furious. It's my most treasured possession now, this piece of gum is. At night time, I just stick it on the end of the bedpost, and it's as good as ever in the mornings. A bit hard at first, maybe, but it soon softens up again after I've given it a few good chews. Before I started chewing for the world record, I used to change my piece of gum once a day. I used to do it in our lift on the way home from school. Why the lift? Because I liked sticking the gooey piece that I'd just finished with on one of the control buttons. Then the next person who came along and pressed the button got my old gum on the end of his or her finger. Ha ha! And what a racket they kicked up, some of them. You get the best results from women who have expensive gloves on. Oh yes, I'm thrilled to be going to Mr. Wonka's factory, and I understand that afterwards he's going to give me enough gum to last me for the rest of my whole life. Whoopee! Hooray! Beastly girl, said Grandma Josephine. Despicable, said Grandma Georgina. She'll come to a sticky end, that one, chewing all that gum. You see if she doesn't. And who got the 4th golden ticket? Charlie asked. Now let me see, said Mr. Bucket, peering at the newspaper again. Ah, yes, here we are. The 4th golden ticket, he read, was found by a boy called Mike TV. Another bad lot, I'll be bound, muttered Grandma Josephine. Don't interrupt, Grandma, said Mrs. Bucket. The TV household, said Mr. Bucket, going on with his reading, was crammed like all the others with excited visitors when our reporter arrived. But young Mike TV, the lucky winner, seemed extremely annoyed by the whole business. Can't you fools see I'm watching television? He said angrily. I wish you wouldn't interrupt. The 9-year-old boy was seated before an enormous television set with his eyes glued to the screen, and he was watching a film in which one bunch of gangsters was shooting up another bunch of gangsters with machine guns. Mike TV himself had no less than 18 toy pistols of various sizes hanging from belts around his body, and every now and again he would leap up into the air and fire off half a dozen rounds from one or another of these weapons. Quiet! He shouted when someone tried to ask him a question. Didn't I tell you not to interrupt? This show's an absolute whiz-banger. It's terrific. I watch it every day. I watch all of them every day, even the rotten ones when there's no shooting. I like the gangsters best. They're terrific, those gangsters, especially when they start pumping each other full of lead or flashing the old stilettos or giving each other the 1, 2, 3 with their knuckle dusters. Gosh, what I wouldn't give to be doing that myself. It's the life, I tell you, it's terrific. That's quite enough, snapped Grandma Josephine. I can't bear to listen to it. Not me, said Grandma Georgina. Don't all children behave like this nowadays, like these brats we've been hearing about? Of course not, said Mr. Bucket, smiling at the old lady in the bed. Some do, of course. In fact, quite a lot of them do, but not all. And now there's only 1 ticket left, said Grandpa George. Quite so, sniffed Grandma Georgina. And just as sure as I'll be having cabbage soup for supper tomorrow, that ticket will go to some nasty little beast who doesn't deserve it.